There is a man in Tehran who has never given a single press conference. He has never appeared on state television. He has never signed a law, commanded a military unit, or held a cabinet position. And yet, right now, Western intelligence agencies believe he controls more of Iran's future than any general, any minister, or any elected official alive. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei. He is 56 years old, and he may be weeks, months, or at most a few years away from becoming the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, the most insulated, most protected, and most dangerous position in the Middle East. Here is the question that no intelligence service has been able to answer. Where is he right now? Yakov had spent 11 years running agents inside Iran. He was not the kind of officer who used dramatic language in briefings. His colleagues described him as someone who spoke in probabilities, not certainties. A man who had learned through repeated operational experience that the moment you became confident about a target was the moment the target became dangerous to you. In November 2022, Yakov received a briefing packet that he read twice. Then he read it a third time. Then he set it down and said quietly, to no one in particular, "We have been watching the wrong man for the wrong reasons." What he meant would take months to fully explain. What had started was an operation that would consume the next 2 years of his professional life and would force him to confront a possibility he had not seriously considered before, that the target had already thought about being tracked and had built his life accordingly. To understand why Mojtaba Khamenei is such an exceptional intelligence problem, you have to understand what he is not. He is not a nuclear scientist with a badge and a facility address. He is not a general with a command structure you can map from signals traffic. He is not a Hezbollah commander who attends funerals and shakes hands in public. Every Iranian figure that Israeli intelligence has successfully tracked, pressured, or eliminated over the last 20 years has had one thing in common. They existed inside a visible institutional structure. They had titles, they had offices, they had meetings that appeared in some form on a calendar that could be reconstructed. Mojtaba has none of that. Officially, he is a mid-ranking cleric with no government portfolio. His name does not appear in the IRGC's published command hierarchy. He holds no seat in the Assembly of Experts, no position in the Guardian Council, no formal role in any of the institutions that foreign governments track as a matter of routine. What he has, instead, is something far harder to map: informal authority. He sits at the intersection of 3 overlapping networks: the Supreme Leader's personal office, the base-age paramilitary structure, and a constellation of financial foundations called bonyads that collectively fund weapons procurement, media operations, and clerical loyalty programs across the country. He does not command these networks. He coordinates them through intermediaries, through clerics whose appointments trace back to his father's patronage, through a personal security detail that operates outside every named ministry. The CIA, in one assessment that was later partially leaked, described him as a node without a label. Mossad's Signals Intelligence Division had a different phrase for him internally. They called him, in translated briefing documents, the shadow with a schedule. That second word was the opening. A schedule meant movement. Movement meant pattern. And pattern, in theory, meant vulnerability. The question was whether anyone could find the pattern before it became irrelevant. The 3 anomalies that changed Yakov's assessment arrived in that November 2022 packet, and none of them were dramatic on their own. The first was a series of IRGC command reshuffles, in which officers with informal ties to Mojtaba's coordination network were elevated, while officers whose loyalty ran directly to IRGC Commander Hossein Salami were quietly sidelined. This did not appear in any public announcement. It was visible only through changes in who attended which internal meetings and whose vehicles appeared outside which buildings, the kind of granular pattern that takes years of baseline collection to even recognize as meaningful. The second anomaly was a communication security upgrade inside the Supreme Leader's office that went beyond standard Iranian protocol hardening. Specifically, it insulated a subnetwork of clerical couriers, human messengers, not digital relays, that analysts eventually traced back to what appeared to be Mojtaba's personal coordination layer. Iran had been moving sensitive communication to human couriers for years in response to Israeli signals penetration. But this particular upgrade was not defensive. It was architectural. Someone was building a communication structure designed to survive a sustained intelligence collection effort. The third anomaly was a single intercepted conversation from a Mossad asset inside Iran's Ministry of Intelligence. A mid-level official reported overhearing a reference to succession preparations as already underway. Not contingency planning, not theoretical sequencing, active preparations. Ali Khamenei was 82 years old. He had a documented history of prostate cancer. The succession had, until that moment, been treated by most Western intelligence services as a medium-term concern, something to monitor but not something requiring immediate operational response. That framing was now wrong, and Yakov knew it. The briefing packet landed at a specific moment in Mossad's institutional calendar. The organization had just completed 2 years of high-intensity operations against Iran's nuclear program, the Natanz facility sabotage, the assassination of senior IRGC officers, the ongoing pressure campaign against weapons shipment networks. These were operations against visible targets inside visible systems. They had worked because the targets were findable. Yakov's argument to his supervisors was not that Mojtaba needed to be eliminated. His argument was more precise and more urgent, that the window for understanding Mojtaba, for building a complete enough intelligence picture to have any options at all, was closing. Once the succession was complete, once Mojtaba held the Supreme Leader's office, the entire category of operational tools that Israel had spent 30 years developing would become politically and practically unusable against him. A head of state is not a general. The calculus changes entirely. His supervisors listened. A new intelligence collection program was authorized, not an assassination operation, not a sabotage mission, but a sustained effort to map the architecture of Mojtaba's influence with enough precision to support future decisions, whatever those decisions turned out to be. The program was given an internal designation that has never been made public. For this documentary, we will call it Operation Threshold. The objective was simple to state and nearly impossible to execute. Find the shadow with a schedule and build the map before the window closed. What Yakov did not know, sitting in Tel Aviv in late 2022, authorizing the first phase of that operation, was that he was not the first person to think carefully about what this operation would look like. Someone in Tehran had already thought about it, had already considered what an intelligence service would need to collect, what kind of asset they would recruit, what category of information would be most valuable, and what a compromised version of that information would look like if it were allowed to flow, controlled, calibrated, just wrong enough to matter. Operation Threshold had not yet begun, and it was already being anticipated by the target, the map Yakov was about to spend. 18 months building would look exactly like a real map. It would score within acceptable confidence margins. It would be internally consistent, and it would be 4 degrees off true in every direction that mattered. But that is not the question that was sitting on Yakov's desk in November 2022. The question on his desk was simpler, and it was the question that would define the next 2 years of his life. How do you track a man who was designed, from the beginning, not to be tracked? By early 2023, Operation Threshold had moved from authorization to active collection. Yakov's team had assembled a small analytical cell, 4 people in Tel Aviv, 2 liaison officers working through European partner services, and a technical support unit inside Unit 8200 dedicated to signals pattern analysis for a single target. For an operation with no kinetic objective, it was a significant resource allocation. That fact alone told Yakov how seriously the authorization had been taken at the institutional level. The collection strategy had 3 parallel tracks. The first was signals, monitoring the communications traffic around the institutions adjacent to Mojtaba's coordination layer, not trying to intercept Mojtaba directly, but mapping the shape of the silence around him, where encrypted traffic spiked, where courier activity increased, where IRGC security protocols activated without a corresponding public event. The second track was financial, tracing the movement of funds through the Mossad network to identify timing patterns that might correlate with physical movement or high-level meetings. The third track was human intelligence, which in early 2023 meant existing assets being asked new questions, not a new recruitment. For the first 6 months, the picture that assembled itself was consistent, and, to Yakov's team, genuinely illuminating. Mojtaba was not hiding in the way a fugitive hides. He was present in Tehran, active, moving through the city on what appeared to be a loosely regular schedule. He simply moved through systems that generated no visible record. No phone, no digital calendar, No vehicle registered to a traceable identity. Human couriers. Face-to-face coordination. A security rotation that changed frequently enough to prevent baseline pattern analysis from any single vantage point. What the signal's picture did show was the negative space around him. Whenever Mojtaba coordinated something significant, a clerical appointment, a financial authorization, a message to IRGC leadership, the surrounding network reacted. Traffic patterns shifted, certain couriers activated, certain boneyard accounts moved funds in a particular sequence. Unit 8200 built a model of those reactions and began using the model to infer activity timing, even without direct observation. It was indirect mapping, reading the wake of a ship you could not see. Yakov reviewed the model in mid-2023 and described it in an internal assessment as the most sophisticated negative space intelligence product his team had ever built on an Iranian target. He meant that as a genuine compliment to his analysts. He did not yet understand that the sophistication of the product was, in part, a problem. The human intelligence track accelerated in the second half of 2023, when Yakov's team identified a recruitment possibility that had not been on the original target list. He was an Iranian accountant, we will call him Dariush, who worked within the financial administration of one of the mid-tier Boneyard foundations. He was not close to Mojtaba. He had, as far as could be established, never been in the same room as Mojtaba. What he had was transactional visibility. He processed a category of internal financial transfers that, when cross-referenced against the Unit 8200 behavioral model, corresponded with high confidence to Mojtaba's coordination activity. When certain accounts moved funds in certain sequences, Mojtaba was, the model suggested, preparing for or concluding a significant meeting. Dariush could not tell Mossad where Mojtaba was, but he could tell them when Mojtaba was active, and timing, combined with the signals picture, could eventually narrow the location window to something operationally useful. The recruitment took 14 months. It was conducted through a third-country contact, carefully compartmented, with no direct Israeli fingerprint in the initial approach. Dariush was under financial pressure, a family situation that had created personal debt inside a system where personal debt has institutional consequences. His ideological position was harder to read. Yakov's assessment was that Dariush had genuine disillusionment with the regime, but Yakov was disciplined enough as a case officer to treat that as background context, not operational foundation. Assets motivated by ideology are unpredictable when pressure increases. Assets motivated by financial arrangement are at least predictable in their transactions. Dariush began passing information in the first quarter of 2024. For 3 months, the product was exceptional. Transaction dates, account movement sequences, references to unnamed institutional accounts that aligned precisely with the behavioral model Unit 8200 had spent a year constructing. Every piece of incoming intelligence from Dariush reinforced the existing picture. The map was filling in with a coherence that Yakov had rarely seen in long-term collection operations. He told a colleague, in a moment of genuine professional satisfaction, that the product was the cleanest he had received from an Iranian asset in years. He would later mark that sentence as the moment he should have stopped and asked a harder question. Clean intelligence is not always good intelligence. In collection operations against sophisticated counterintelligence services, internally consistent product can mean two things. It can mean the asset is reliable and the picture is accurate, or it can mean the picture has been constructed to be consistent, that someone on the other side has decided what you should see and has built a version of reality calibrated precisely to your existing model. The distinction is almost impossible to detect from inside a running operation. That is the design. In April 2024, one of Yakov's analysts, a younger officer who had spent her previous posting studying Iranian counterintelligence doctrine, raised a concern in a team review session. Her concern was not that any specific piece of Dariush's product was wrong. Her concern was structural. She said, in the session, that the product matched the model too well, that in her experience, real intelligence from inside a complex organization contained friction, small inconsistencies, timing anomalies, gaps that didn't quite close. Dariush's product had none of that. Every piece fit, every sequence correlated. The picture had no rough edges. Yakov heard the concern. He did not dismiss it. He asked the team to run a formal consistency audit, a structured analytical exercise designed to test whether the product's coherence was within expected parameters for a genuinely reliable source, or whether it exceeded those parameters in a way that suggested external curation. The audit took 3 weeks. The result? Dariush's product scored within acceptable reliability margins. Not at the top of those margins. Within them. Yakov reviewed the audit results and approved a continued collection. The operation moved forward. What the audit could not test, what no internal analytical process can test without external ground truth, was whether the acceptable reliability margins had themselves been used as a targeting parameter. Whether the people on the other side of this operation had studied Mossad's validation methodology closely enough to produce intelligence that would pass it. That question was not asked in April 2024. It would not be asked until it was too late to change what had already been built on the answers. In June 2024, Yakov's supervisor called him into a review meeting that had not been on the scheduled calendar. 2 additional senior officers were present. The meeting was about a different concern, not Dariush's product, but the operational timeline. The succession indicators had accelerated. Multiple regional intelligence services were now reporting the same pattern. Clerical consensus building inside the Assembly of Experts was moving faster than any previous projection had suggested. The financial consolidation inside the Mossad network, the same network Dariush was monitoring, showed a pattern consistent with institutional preparation for a leadership transition. The window that Yakov had argued in 2022 was still open had, according to the new assessment, narrowed to somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. One of the senior officers in the room said directly that if Operation Threshold had not produced an actionable targeting package by the end of the current collection phase, the question of what to do with the intelligence product would need to be reevaluated at a level above Yakov's authorization ceiling. That was not a threat, it was a timeline pressure. But timeline pressure in intelligence operations produces a specific kind of institutional distortion. The people running the collection begin unconsciously weighting results that support progression over results that counsel pause. Yakov understood this. He had seen it happen to other operations. He had lectured junior officers about it. And sitting in that meeting in June 2024, he felt it. A pull toward the clean, coherent, internally consistent picture that Dariush had been building, because that picture supported moving forward, and moving forward was what the institutional pressure now required. He approved the first active surveillance phase of Operation Threshold 3 days later. The asset was in place. The map was ready. And somewhere in Tehran, in a layer of the Iranian security apparatus that had no public name and no visible leadership, someone had been waiting for exactly this decision. The surveillance asset Yakov's team deployed in June 2024 was not Israeli. He was a European national, a man who had worked on the periphery of Mossad's external network for several years, conducting low-risk observation tasks in countries where an Israeli passport would be operationally impossible. He had never worked inside Iran before. For this documentary, we will call him Emil. Emil's assignment was narrow and, on paper, relatively low exposure. He was to establish a residential position near a religious institution in northwest Tehran that the pattern map had identified as a primary coordination site, a location where, according to the behavioral model and Dariush's corroborating transaction data, Mojtaba's clerical intermediaries met on a loosely regular schedule. Emil was not to approach the building, not to photograph individuals at close range, not to interact with anyone connected to the site. His job was to observe vehicle presence, security rotation timing, and activity patterns, and to report back through a sterile communication channel every 48 hours. The cover was straightforward. Emil entered Iran on a valid European passport, registered as a cultural researcher affiliated with a real academic institution that had no knowledge of his actual purpose. The cover had depth. It had been backstopped with genuine correspondence, a published paper under the identity, and a research inquiry submitted to an Iranian Cultural Ministry office 3 months in advance. If checked at a surface level, it held. Yakov reviewed the operational plan the night before Emil's entry. He ran through the contingency protocols. He reviewed the abort criteria, the specific conditions under which Emil was authorized to terminate the assignment and extract without waiting for authorization from Tel Aviv. He signed the final deployment authorization at 11 in the evening and went home. He did not sleep well. He would later say he was not sure why. The plan was sound. The asset was experienced. The cover was solid. There was no specific operational indicator that should have produced unease. And yet something in the picture felt, to use his word, too assembled. as if every piece had been placed rather than found. He did not act on that feeling. He told himself it was the natural anxiety of a senior officer at the moment of commitment after 2 years of preparation. He had felt it before other operations. It usually meant nothing. He went to sleep. Emil crossed the border the following morning. For the first 2 weeks, Emil's reports were exactly what the pattern map had projected. Vehicles appeared at the coordination site on the expected schedule. A specific dark sedan that Unit 8200 had flagged through earlier signals correlation arrived on Tuesday and Thursday mornings with consistent timing. A security rotation that matched the predicted protocol change interval was observed twice. On the 9th day, Emil reported that a convoy of 3 vehicles, a configuration associated in the behavioral model with high-level clerical movement, arrived at the site for approximately 40 minutes and then departed. His report was precise, calm, and entirely consistent with what Yakov's team had anticipated. In Tel Aviv, the analytical cell ran the incoming reports against the behavioral model and produced a confidence update. The coordination site was confirmed active. The pattern map was holding. Yakov reviewed the update and authorized continuation. On the 17th day, the sedan did not appear. Emil reported it as a schedule anomaly and waited. On the 19th day, the convoy configuration did not appear. On the 21st day, the site was present and externally normal, security personnel visible, the building occupied, but the specific vehicle signatures that the model had flagged as coordination indicators were absent. Yakov's team ran an immediate reassessment. The signals picture from Unit 8200 showed no disruption. Dariush's most recent product, received 4 days earlier, showed no change in the financial transaction patterns. The behavioral model was not generating any alert. Everything surrounding the coordination site looked unchanged. The site itself had simply gone quiet. The first interpretation, which Yakov's team reached within 24 hours, was a scheduled operational pause. High-value targets in the Iranian system occasionally shifted their patterns as a matter of routine security discipline, not in response to a perceived threat, but as standard protocol. The model had a category for this. The recommended response was to hold position and monitor. Emil held position. On day 28, Yakov received a query from his supervisor asking for a status assessment. The query was professionally phrased but carried an implicit pressure. The institutional timeline had not changed, and a month of surveillance without confirmatory observation was a resource question as much as an operational one. Yakov drafted a response that argued for continued patience. He sent it. He received a reply that approved 2 more weeks. He did not tell his supervisor what he was beginning to think privately, that the pause felt different from a routine protocol shift, that the specific vehicle signatures had gone quiet in a way that was too complete, that a genuine schedule rotation would typically produce substitute activity patterns, and the site was producing none. It was not less active, it was differently active, present, but not performing the coordination function the model said it should be performing. He did not raise this concern formally because he could not yet distinguish it from his own anxiety, and because raising it meant recommending a pause that the institutional timeline did not have room for. On day 31, Emil had a near contact. He was conducting a routine observation pass, a walking route that took him past the site's peripheral street. At a distance, the operational plan had assessed as safe, when a plainclothes security figure who had not appeared in any previous observation stepped off a doorway and walked parallel to him for half a block before turning away. Emil did not panic. He completed his route at the same pace, returned to his residential position and filed an immediate report flagging the contact as a possible surveillance detection. His assessment was that the figure had not identified him, had, in fact, seemed to lose interest, but that the presence of an unrecognized security element in the peripheral zone warranted attention. In Tel Aviv, the report produced the first serious aborted discussion of the operation. Yakov's security officer argued for immediate extraction. The plainclothes figure was an unknown variable. If Iranian counterintelligence had extended its security perimeter around the coordination site, even as a precaution unrelated to Emil specifically, then Emil's continued presence in the area elevated exposure beyond the authorized risk threshold. The abort criteria in the operational plan were explicit. Unrecognized security presence within observable range of the asset's position was a mandatory review. Trigger. Yakov did not immediately agree. His argument was operational rather than emotional. Extracting Emil now, with the surveillance picture incomplete, and the pattern map's coordination site confirmation unverified for a month meant terminating the entire active collection phase without the deliverable that had justified it. The asset was not identified. The contact had been brief and inconclusive. The abort criteria specified a review trigger, not an automatic extraction. The discussion lasted 2 hours. Yakov's position held. Emil remained in position under modified movement restrictions, reduced observation passes, extended intervals between activity reports, no approach within 2 blocks of the coordination site's immediate perimeter. For the next 6 days, nothing happened. No further contact, no additional unrecognized security presence. The site continued its pattern of normal external activity without coordination indicators. On the 38th day, the dark sedan returned. Emil reported it at 7:40 in the morning. The sedan arrived at the expected time, remained for the expected duration, and departed on a route consistent with previous observations. 2 hours later, the convoy configuration appeared. 40 minutes, 3 vehicles. Departure. The behavioral model lit up. The financial transaction data that Darius had submitted 2 days prior, which Yakov's analysts had been holding for correlation, matched the activity window precisely. The coordination site was active again. The pause was over. The pattern had resumed exactly as the model predicted it would. In Tel Aviv, the analytical cell ran a confidence assessment and returned a result of high alignment. Yakov reviewed it and felt, for the first time in 5 weeks, that the operation was back on solid ground. The near abort had been the right call to resist. The schedule disruption had been exactly what the model's routine pause category described. Emil was in position, uncompromised, observing a confirmed active coordination site. He sent his supervisor a brief update, collection phase proceeding. Pattern confirmed, resumed. Requesting authorization to move to next observation tier. Authorization was granted within the hour. What no one on Yakov's team knew, what the behavioral model could not show, what Darius's transaction data could not reveal, what Emil's 38 days of careful observation had not detected, was that the coordination site had not paused because of a routine security rotation. It had paused because it had stopped being used. The sedan that returned on day 38 was the right sedan on the right schedule. The convoy was the right configuration. The transaction patterns matched. Everything the model was built to recognize had reappeared, exactly on cue, because it had been restarted specifically to reappear. The coordination site was now a performance. The real meetings were happening somewhere that no pattern map had ever pointed to, somewhere that the financial flows Darius was monitoring had been quietly redirected away from, in a shift so incremental that it had not registered as a change at all. Emil was watching the right building. He was watching it correctly, professionally, at exactly the right intervals. He was watching a stage set, and in Tehran, the people who had built it were watching him watch it, and waiting to see how long it would take Mossad to notice that the shadow with the schedule had simply changed his schedule and left the shadow behind. The first indication that something had fundamentally broken came not from Emil's reports, but from their absence. On day 43, Emil missed his scheduled 48-hour check-in. In a controlled operation with an experienced asset, a single missed interval is not automatically a crisis. Communication windows close for legitimate reasons, a security presence in the area, a technical failure, a judgment call by the asset that the transmission environment was not clean. Yakov's team logged the miss and waited for the next window. The next window also produced nothing. Yakov activated the contingency protocol on day 45. A secondary contact method, a dead drop signal embedded in a publicly accessible digital space, E, was checked. The signal that would indicate Emil was safe and operational was not there. The signal that would indicate he was compromised and in custody was also not there. What was there was nothing, which is the hardest result to interpret and the one that requires the most disciplined response, because nothing can mean anything. The formal abort authorization was issued on day 46. It did not extract Emil. An extraction requires knowing where the asset is. It suspended all operation-connected activity in Tehran, froze the communication channels, and activated a passive monitoring protocol designed to detect any Iranian security announcement, arrest record, or intelligence chatter that might indicate what had happened to a European national conducting unauthorized activity inside the country. For 11 days, there was no such indication. Emil re-established contact on day 57 through an emergency protocol that Yakov had not expected to be used. a channel reserved for situations where the primary and secondary methods were both inaccessible. Emil was alive, undetected, and had self-extracted to a third country. He had not been arrested. He had not been approached. He had, on day 42, observed something that caused him to immediately cease all activity and begin a careful, slow withdrawal from his residential position. What he had observed was this: the dark sedan that had returned on day 38 and resumed its expected schedule had, on day 42, arrived at the coordination site and been met by a security configuration that Emil did not recognize. Not larger, not more aggressive. Different. The personnel, the vehicle positioning, the rotation interval, all of it had shifted in a way that was subtle enough to miss if you were not paying close attention, and Emil had been paying very close attention for 6 weeks. His assessment, reported in full once he was safely out of Iran, was that the site's security posture had changed in a way consistent with the transition from active operational use to managed presentation. The site was still being run, but it was being run differently, with the kind of careful, deliberate maintenance that you apply to something you want to keep looking real without it actually being real. Emil had recognized a stage set because he had spent long enough watching the original production to notice when the actors had been replaced. Yakov received Emil's full debrief in a secure facility outside Tel Aviv. He read it in one sitting. Then he went back to the analytical record of the entire operation. Every confidence assessment, every model update, every decision point, and worked through it with the debrief in hand. The picture that assembled itself was not the picture of an operation that had been ambushed. It was the picture of an operation that had been allowed to run. The coordination site had been genuine. The early surveillance was real. The pattern map had been accurate for the period before VAJA's counterintelligence adjustment had taken effect, and that period of accuracy had served a specific purpose. It had built Yakov's team's confidence in the model. It had validated Dariush's product. It had created an operational foundation solid enough that when the site transitioned from real to managed, the transition was invisible against the established baseline. Every correct result in the first phase of the operation had been, in retrospect, a contribution to the deception infrastructure of the second phase. The decision Yakov had made to resist the abort recommendation on day 31, the 2-hour discussion, the judgment call that Emil was unidentified and the risk was manageable, now carried a different weight. It had not been wrong by the standards of the information available at the time, but it had been the decision that kept the operation running past the point where it could have been paused before the stage set was completed. If the operation had extracted on day 31, the analytical damage would have been limited. The team would have known the surveillance picture was incomplete. They would not have received the day 38 resumption A, the confirmation that locked in the false picture as validated intelligence. Yakov documented this in his formal assessment. He did not soften it. He wrote that the decision to continue on day 31 was made correctly under the available information and incorrectly under the actual operational conditions, and that the distinction was not a procedural failure, but a structural one. The operation had been run against a counterintelligence service that understood Mossad's validation methodology well enough to produce results that would pass it. Dariush's silence, which had begun in October 2024, was addressed in a separate assessment. The conclusion, reached after extensive technical and analytical review, was that Vaja had identified the financial information leak category and had quietly removed Dariush from the equation, not through arrest, not through public action, but through an internal reassignment that severed his access to the transaction data he had been monitoring. The information flow stopped because the access stopped. Dariush himself, as far as could be determined, was alive and had not been prosecuted. That finding was, in one sense, a relief. In every operational sense, it was worse than an arrest. An arrest would have told Mossad the channel was burned. The quiet reassignment left the channel in a state of permanent ambiguity. Mossad could not confirm the asset was compromised, could not confirm the intelligence product had been manipulated from a specific point, and could not safely rebuild human collection inside the Boneyard network without knowing how precisely Vaja had mapped the leak. The ambiguity was the damage. It was designed to be. The 18-month intelligence product, the behavioral model, the pattern map, the coordination site confirmation, was formally reclassified, not destroyed, not discarded. Reclassified as potentially contaminated, which meant it could not be used as a foundation for future operational planning without independent verification that did not yet exist, and had no clear path to being obtained. 2 years of work had produced a picture that could not be trusted and could not be replaced quickly enough to matter. The succession timeline did not pause for any of this. By late 2024, multiple regional intelligence services, including those of 2 Gulf states with their own reasons to track Iranian internal politics closely, were reporting the same pattern. The clerical consensus inside the assembly of experts was consolidating. The financial architecture of the Mossad network was being restructured in ways consistent with a transition of authority. The IRGC command adjustments that Yaakov's team had first flagged in 2022 had continued, and the officers now in elevated positions were, by every analytical measure, aligned with Mojtaba's coordination layer rather than with the existing institutional hierarchy. The window that Yaakov had described in 2022 as still open had not simply narrowed. It had, in the assessment of most analysts who reviewed the full picture, effectively closed, not because of a single decision or a single failure, but because the accumulation of time, the contamination of the intelligence product, and the institutional pressure to keep the operation moving rather than pause, it had consumed the window from the inside. Israel's options with respect to Mojtaba Khamenei had not become zero, but they had become categorically different. The tools developed. Over 30 years of operations against Iranian military commanders, nuclear scientists, and terror financiers were built for targets inside visible systems. A supreme leader is not inside a visible system. He is the system. And the political, legal, and strategic cost of direct action against a head of state, even one deeply hostile to Israel, is a cost that no operational success can fully absorb. What Operation Threshold had ultimately produced was a precise, documented understanding of a problem that had no available solution. The map was wrong. The window was closed. And the man who had never given a press conference, never signed a public decree, never appeared in an official photograph, was closer to untouchable than he had been when the operation began. Yaakov's final written assessment of Operation Threshold contained one sentence that his supervisors flagged for removal before the document was distributed to the broader intelligence community. They removed it because it was not analytical language. Yaakov kept it in his personal record. The sentence was, "We did not fail to find him. We failed to understand that being found was something he had already planned for." The succession in Iran will happen. The question that intelligence services are now working inside is not whether Mojtaba Khamenei will inherit the supreme leader's office. It is what kind of Iran he will run when he does, and whether anyone will have built a complete enough picture of who he is before the office makes that picture irrelevant. Operation Threshold did not answer that question. It documented, in precise and costly detail, how difficult the question actually is. If you follow operations that never made the official record, subscribe to Hidden Ops. New documentary every week.